Hello and welcome to our, I want to say, weekly discussion on politics. I'm Bruce Andriach with Buffalo News political reporter Bob McCarthy. I would say weekly, but the last couple of weeks made it impossible to do almost anything, including this. But now we find ourselves in the first week of January, looking ahead to 2023. Uh, Bob, people probably know that you've been covering politics for a long time. You have sources all over the community, all over the state, and that's how I always assumed that you kind of knew what was going to happen before it happened. But actually, it's a more simple system, isn't it?
It really is, Bruce. What it all comes down to is the magic eight ball, really. I mean, it's that time of the year when we start consulting the spherical seer, the oracle orb, the pool ball predictor for all things political. It's time for the annual Magic 8 Ball column, Bruce, and with a look ahead at 2023 and what our good friend, the Magic 8 Ball, will be telling us lies in store for politics around here in 2023.
So if any of this doesn't turn out to be true, just remember send your emails to the Magic Eight Ball, not to Bob McCarthy. Uh,
That's right.
Bob, one of the things that's coming up this year that we'll be paying close attention to is our county executive Mark Poloncarz up for reelection, and for a while there, over the last 2 years, I would have pandemic would at the top of people's minds as an issue, and likely it still will be. But I think what happened over the previous couple of weeks with the blizzard, his response to it is going to be a major issue. How do you see his reelection campaign
Yeah,
playing
I,
out now?
I think you're real right about that, Bruce. And I don't think you really need one of these to say that it's going to be dominating our politics as we come along this year. A couple of weeks ago, when the big November storm hit, we had a column about the politics of snow, and we talked about historically how executives, mayors, and county executives and governors handle these things very much enter into election campaigns. I don't think that's going to be any different. I do think that Mark Poloncarz will highlight his response to the storm as an executive in charge, as someone who is able to handle a crisis situation, and he'll emphasize that with clips from his news conferences, wearing his county executive jacket and in command. But he had a few blips, he had a few problems with that along the way, especially his criticism of the mayor, which he ended up apologizing for when he criticized the mayor for the way the city was handling its response to snow. So I think, yeah, the point is here that the politics of snow will very much enter into this campaign because it is such a huge issue this year, as is the pandemic, as is his response to that. So the Republicans are going to have a tough time with that. But hey, he's been in there for 3 terms, and sometimes shelf life becomes an issue too.
Yeah, it really could be kind of the politics of crisis management because it does feel like for 3 years that's what we've been dealing with. And speaking of whoever that Republican opponent might be, who are the early names we should be paying attention to who are likely to challenge polling cars?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in this week's column also. They got some regulars. We've got Chris Jacobs, who has just left Congress. We've got Ed Rath, who has just left the state Senate. We've got Mickey Kearns, a Democrat who has this peculiar habit of winning on the Republican line, who just
Right.
won as county clerk once again. That's being talked about, although there's a lot of machinations that would be involved with that one. An interesting name is Gary Dixon, the West Seneca supervisor, who has this reputation also of a Republican winning in Democratic turf, former FBI agent, fresh face. A lot of things that could be done there, but it would take an awful lot of money to go up against Mark Poloncarz, who has an awful lot of money himself
Right.
and a lot of name recognition. And a lot of that money for a fresh face on the Republicans' part would have to be just spent just introducing himself. And that is a big assignment for the Repubs.
You mentioned a name during the list of possible competitors, Ed Rath, who is well known in Western New York, well known political family, and found himself in an unusual race last year thanks to redistricting. This year, we're going to be hearing a little bit about how that affects assembly races. And one of the names that comes up in that context is Monica Wallace, who the assemblyman likely could have more power this year, but is facing a really difficult reelection campaign as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that early this week, the Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hastie, released his list of new appointments, and Monica Wallace was named chairwoman of the Majority Steering Committee. Now, I really don't know what that means, except that she is in the leadership position and the only other Western New Yorker besides Majority Leader Crystal Peoples who holds a leadership position in the Assembly. That says to me that the Democrats know that after a new redistricting effort that will be in effect early this year, that it could cause problems for members of the assembly from Western New York, like Monica Wallace. I think they want to give her
Right.
every possible advantage that they can. Give her some clout, give her some visibility on a statewide scene, and give her some visibility in Albany too. So I think that's what this is about. Plus the fact that she has proven to be a very effective legislator from Western New York. But watch those assembly races. It's not this year, but it'll be next
Right.
year. But this year will determine how those district lines are drawn, and will very much figure into the politics of 2024. I think.
And we know that once a campaign ends, all that means is the campaign is beginning again, and I'm sure
Oh,
that's what
you
it
just
is
hit it.
for
Yes,
Assemblywoman
absolutely.
Wallace. Bob, as we are talking today, of course, the biggest political story in the nation, maybe in the world right now, is what's going on in the House of Representatives and the Republicans' so far inability to name a speaker, and that's put one of the newest members of Congress in an unusual position. Nick Langworthy still has not been officially sworn in, but putting aside what he's going to do in Congress, his election in November at the leadership level in state Republican politics, and the question of who is going to replace him in that job is one that you're dealing with as well. What do you think is going to happen next there?
Yeah, I would doubt that we will see it return to Western New York, Bruce. His Nick Langworthy's election from Buffalo represented the first time that someone from Erie County had held the job since Ed Jekyll back in the 40s, who was a major figure in state and national Republican politics. But it took all that time for another Buffalonian to hold that post. So remember that the strongest performance for Lee Zeldin in the gubernatorial election in November stemmed from his native Long Island. And so Nassau and Suffolk counties, I think, are going to really be the kingmakers here because they hold the most weighted vote in any type of election that will happen. But there's a few names that are going out there. There's some small county Republican chairs who have expressed interest. And but there's some other names out there too, such as Rob Astorino, the former county executive from the Hudson Valley, who ran for governor this year and was the nominee back in 2014. And also Colin Schmidt. That's an interesting name that's coming up too. He is a just has just left the assembly after a unsuccessful but close race in the Hudson Valley for Congress against Democrat Pat Ryan. There's some serious talk about him too, but it's a tough assignment. This is still a really Democratic state, and Lee Zeldin did very well. And maybe that says, okay, he can a Republican can do well in a Democratic state. Maybe we should go out and try that again. Or maybe it means that you get a really good Republican candidate like Lee Zeldin, and even he can't prevail in uber Democratic New York. So whoever takes over has got to sort through some of those things and face some real challenges.
Bob, thanks again for joining us this week. We'll look forward to reading more about it in your column on Sunday, and we'll see you right back here next week.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Bob.